Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks to Susan for the introductions. As she explained, we are going to try and talk about some of the implications of the what we call the hard proper Brexit, if you like, the UK leaving the jurisdiction of the EU laws, and in particularly the impact on REACH. So to begin, if hopefully most of you on this webinar will know what REACH is, but in case not, it is an acronym. It stands for the Registration, Evaluation, Authorization and Restriction of Chemicals. It applies to the European Union member states and also the members of the European Economic Area, EEA. So that includes Liechtenstein, Norway and Iceland. The principle is that, as per the registration, you have to submit a dossier of information to register your chemicals for use within the EEA, and then there are a number of restrictions and authorizations that take place, and you're then given permission to supply to the market. And the principle of REACH is no data, no market. There are different roles and responsibilities within the supply chain, which we'll come on and talk about. And also responsibilities are dependent on the amount of substances, and this is we're talking about substances here, not mixtures of things. So the responsibilities lie within tonnage bands for how much is supplied per annum, and the responsibilities under REACH in terms of registration, etc., start at 1 ton. So a lot of the content today is going to assume that that 1 ton limit applies to you. If you're below that 1 ton, then it may be that some of this doesn't apply to you. So the current status of the legislation. So we are currently in what has been termed the transition period. So that means that all UK regulations, all the EU regulations, which includes REACH and also on classification, labelling and packaging of chemicals, continues to apply within the UK. And all the existing registrations with the European Chemicals Agency, ECHA, remain valid for UK-based entities. We can continue to supply as a UK entity. You can continue to supply to the EEA under the existing rules and under that existing registration. That is until the end of the transition period. And why we don't know for certain when that will be, all the indications currently are that that'll be the end of this calendar year. So in other words, the last day of the transition period is the 31st of December 2020, and that's what we are assuming at this moment. Now, after that transition period ends, then what then happens is that all EU regulations no longer apply, except you'll see there's an asterisk there, it's a very big asterisk. To allow for that transition within UK law, there have been various pieces of legislation gone through Parliament, and REACH actually has been subject to a special statutory instrument, so actually continues to be enshrined in UK law. But of course, the role of something like European Chemical Agency will no longer apply. So therefore, that has been replaced within the UK version of the law to allow for a new body, a UK body, to take on the role of taking those registrations. It also means at that point that all registrations with ECHA for UK-based entities lapse. They cease to be. Also then, as a corollary of that, the UK entity cannot supply to the EEA without a valid registration. Again, we're assuming that 1 ton limit actually applies. Now, depending on where you source or where you supply chemicals to, then it may be that your role may change if you're currently either UK based or based within the European Union. And we'll touch upon some of those scenarios in a little while. While we're not covering other legislation today, just for completeness, just to say that the rules on classification, labelling, and packaging of chemicals continues to come into force. We will continue to use the GHS system, globally harmonised system, and we're expecting the UK system for REACH also to replicate the current EU system as well. So UK REACH, as I said, the legislation's gone through Parliament, it's on the statute books. So what will happen is that the UK will establish its own registration system, and it will mirror. It's intended to mirror both the intention, the form, and the function of EU REACH, if you like. But the responsibility for registrations will be taken over by the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE, and the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs will be established as the UK department that will take over some of the functions as well, other functions of ECHA. So as I said, the idea is that we will replicate that system, so they will run in parallel. So in terms of the process, you will see quite a lot that is familiar, and that includes the drafting and the supplying of safety data sheets, STS, etc. And the UK has also said that any existing registrants to ECHA will be able to grandfather their existing registrations into the new scheme. There's a very big caveat on that. What will happen is that you will be required to pre-register with the HSE within the first 6 months of the legislation coming to force. Full registration must then follow within 2 years. That includes all of the data requirements for the dossiers, etc., etc. And that will be done via a UK IT REACH system, which will be rolled out, but that'll only be rolled out once UK REACH actually comes into force as a piece of legislation. So you can't get a head start on that, unfortunately. You'll have to wait until the end of the transition period. So to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, we know that there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns. Some of the known unknowns, there's quite a lot of detail that is missing, and the reason for that is predominantly because we're currently still in the process of negotiation with the European Union over the terms of a free trade agreement. If we get a free trade agreement at all, of course. Without going into any of the politics of that, we're just dealing with the actualities of it. Because also the Northern Ireland is essentially becomes a special case because it in effect remains within the customs union and the single market for the European Union. Then any entity based in Northern Ireland in effect is still covered by EU REACH. But of course the Northern Ireland remains part of the United Kingdom. So there is a protocol being worked out, an Northern Ireland protocol. The terms of that, again, are still not been finalised, so we're not entirely sure. But I think you almost need to plan, if you are based in Northern Ireland or supply to Northern Ireland, you have to really, I think, consider that you will be dealing with both regimes parallel. There are considerable uncertainties around data ownership and access agreements. So if you're a member of Substance Information Exchange Forum, for example, or you have a letter of access, we're not entirely sure what the arrangements will be. It may come down to your CIF or lead registrant. Also, because as I mentioned that the UK REACH system will mirror the EU REACH system in a lot of its form and function, will it be that it'll also require joint registrations, so one substance, one registration as per ECHA? That would seem to make sense because it will allow for data sharing, cost sharing, and fulfills some of the brief of REACH in terms of fulfilling safety, but not entailing, for example, things like unnecessary animal experiments. So we're still waiting to hear the results of that, but I think at this stage we would probably bet on there being some sort of arrangement to share data. It also does depend, of course, on the terms, on the outcome of the free trade agreement between the EU and the UK. Also, a further uncertainty is what happens after the hard Brexit, if you like. When we leave the sphere of EU REACH, if you like. Obviously, authorizations will continue to be introduced into annexes of REACH, and so will the registration authorizations be matched within the UK system? Again, we don't know. There are other changes, of course, in the pipeline. So there are changes to both the format and the content of safety data sheets that come into force in Annex 2 of REACH from 1st of January 2021. Again, we haven't yet had word from the UK as to whether those will be replicated within UK REACH. Sorry. It is our bet that they will be, but we don't know. We still don't know that. So as I mentioned before, there are various roles and responsibilities within the supply chain. Most of the responsibilities fall on the top of that supply chain, if you like. If you are either a manufacturer or an importer of substances, then most of those responsibilities, certainly in terms of registration and so on, will fall to you. If you currently rely on someone else doing that for you, and as a result of the EU, so the UK leaving EU reach, it may be that you suddenly become that top tier. So it's something to look out for. For others, downstream users, people who formulate chemicals, place mixtures on the market, etc., a lot of your responsibilities are currently around data gathering and data sharing up and down the supply chain. So providing information to the manufacturers and importers for things like chemical safety assessments and so on, and obviously collating and writing safety data sheets and passing those back down, that kind of thing. Those responsibilities are not likely to change too much for you. It may be that you'll be dealing with different people, some of those functions. There are uncertainties in terms of certain roles, so it could be that if you store chemicals on a commercial basis, for example, then it may be that you suddenly become the importer. So it's worth checking what your roles and responsibilities are, really. This is a real key function. And of course, you can occupy more than one, depending on the substance involved. So it's worth checking. If you're not sure where you stand currently, there are plenty of guides on the, first of all, on the ECHO website, or you can ask able to assist you, or as you work with on Reach. It is important that you understand where you stand currently. Now, we carried out a survey recently in terms of awareness of the changes to Reach and the introduction of UK Reach, and a lot of you were kind enough to reply to that survey. We're also going to feed this into a white paper that we're doing on the impact of the changes and so on and so forth. So, in terms of the replies that we did get, most people were aware that UK Reach was going to come into force after the transition period. I suppose that is good. Roughly about a third of people weren't aware or weren't sure. But of course, you know, that's hopefully why some of you are here today, to understand a bit more and know where to go to find out more. In terms of confidence, well, I'm kind of surprised this is as good as it is, really, because I think it's almost like the more you delve into this, the more you realise you don't know about what the outcomes will be. So fairly even distribution there. So, well, we'll see if that changes after the like today. In terms of what roles you are, then I can see that we've got a good chunk there of importers and manufacturers. We've got some downstream users. We've got only representative. Pretty much a mixture there. So everybody, of course, will be affected in slightly different ways, and again, depending on where you are based. And in terms of where we are based, then most of the results actually, interestingly, have come from UK-based organisations. But Allan's a UK-based organisation, that's understandable. In terms of where you source chemicals from, which again potentially could have an impact on you, that is quite varied, and it's not unexpected that the sources are varied. So if you source from a combination of UK and EEA, then of course may well be subject to some changes. Not least things like customs arrangements, which again we're not going to go into a lot, but there are changes to thoughts on that. Another hopefully lesson you may come out of today is the importance of having discussions with both suppliers and your customers. Pleased to see that some people have started those already, or they are planning to. So we add in those figures together, that's a majority of people. That's good news. If you haven't yet, or you haven't planned, I would really heavily suggest you start to have those conversations. So really just to follow on from that, they kind of lead on from the questions. What we recommend you do at the moment is, first of all, clarify where you are and how things might change for you after the transition period. So think about the markets that you are supplying to or sourcing from, depending on who sits in that supply chain. As mentioned previously, the quantities are very much, will determine your responsibilities. So that will have some impacts on your responsibilities and so on. And if you currently have a registration with ECHA, depending on what you intend to do after the end of the transition period, it may be you need to take some action in terms of changing that where that registration is. So we'll go on to some specific examples, and we'll start with a UK-based entity supplying the UK market. So currently you will hold a registration with ECHA. If you continue to want to supply to the EU, bear in mind this also may include Northern Ireland, of course, then you will need to do something with that registration. The easiest thing probably to do is to transfer that to an only representative based within. You may also have to consider access to that data. You will have to have arrangements in place. The incentives around the data really do depend on the outcome of the free trade agreements. And I've seen the negotiating documents, and there are some quotes in there which would give hope. So the UK side has said that the parties should agree data and information sharing mechanisms and establish a memorandum of understanding similar to Australia and Canada. I think the intention there is to say that we will recognise each other's data. Now, of course, that would solve a lot of the problems around access to data and registrations and so on and so forth. So we'll see what the outcomes are. But of course, I think you need to have those conversations and investigate, access to data, whether it's via your CEF or it's via your sort of access after the end of the transition period. Of course, the other thing you can do is if you're sourcing from EEA-based manufacturer, is if you then source from a UK-based manufacturer, you get around some of your import problems. After the end of the transition period, you will obviously need to pre-register with the HSE, and then with a view to full registration with all of the issues around data sharing, etc., and cost sharing, that we're still details that are yet to be finalized. For a UK-based buyer from EU or EEA, so you're importing, if you like, you will become the importer, or may well become the importer. So, of course, now your supplier has to either register with UK Reach, or they have to appoint a UK only representative. So there are changes both for you and potentially your supplier in that situation. So they would need to make those arrangements, like I said, either register with an OR or appoint an OR, sorry, or register with the HSE. Again, there can be a change of supplier that would get around the problem, if you like. But also, even if you continue to import, as I said before, there are other issues, prior authorization, etc., all that kind of thing, tariffs, customs, that will change after the end of the transition period. Now, if you're UK-based and supplying to, to the EU and EEA countries, then of course you will need to transfer your existing ECHA registration, and the easiest way to do that, because that transfer has to be agreed and allowed, and the easiest way to do that will probably to move to an only representative in the once you've done that, of course, then you've removed yourself from EU Reach, so you don't benefit from the EU Reach regulations. So the timing of that has to be carefully considered, if you like. If you don't have that registration, you allow it to lapse, then of course your EU customer then potentially becomes the importer. So the options there is they could source from elsewhere instead of using you, or you can look to appoint an only representative, or alternatives there. So then they may well source from elsewhere. It is a risk. Okay, so it's a very kind of short summary of some of the issues that will come with the change of legislation with the EU UK no longer being subject to EU reach. So the main points to take away, I think, really are understand where you sit currently within the supply chain. Have a look at any changes to your position after the end of the transition period. If you're UK based and you have an EU reach registration, then of course you need to do something with that, because if you don't, it will just lapse. You will need to consider how to register with the UK reach system. You need to have those discussions, as I said, up and down the supply chain, talk to your suppliers, talk to your clients. The issue of money, there is a survey within the UK chemical industry to say that this may cost industry, UK-based chemical industry, up to £1 billion a year. It's an issue, and we think this will, well, it will cost money. So there is the issue then of either setting aside budgets or planning to keep your continuity of supply going, because while there is there will be a little bit of a transition. The principle of reach will continue to apply, whether that's the UK reach system or the EU reach system, which is, as I said before, no data. Okay, we've got some links to some guidance documents, both in the UK and on the ECHA pages. So some guidance there, for example, on transferring your registration guide. There's a very good ECHA Brexit page and so on. These links will be emailed out in the follow-up to the webinar. So don't worry about trying to copy them down suddenly. That will sort out, don't we? Okay. With that, I would like to also bring on to the webinar Catherine Turl, who we work together very closely on helping people with issues around reach and COP, etc. And hopefully Catherine has had a chance to look through questions as they come through.
Hello. Yeah, welcome to the webinar. Yeah, I am Catherine, and I have the first question, which is, can I appoint an OR from within the EU EEA while the reach regulation still applies in the UK? So can I do that before the end of the transition period, which we think will be the end of this year? According to the reach regulation, you cannot appoint an EU unless you are established outside the EU. So you cannot qualify for performing the transfer before the end of the transition period. Obviously, that makes it quite difficult because you need to do the transfer to keep your registration active. And so what ECHA have recommended is that you have a contractual agreement to appoint the OR, which has a conditional clause in it that it only takes place once the transition period ends at the end of this transition period. So you should do that now, notify that to ECHA with Reach IT, but it won't take place until the end of the transition period. And the link that Bill has put in the document about how to transfer your UK reach registrations includes information regarding how to transfer and set up these agreements. Okay, so that's the first question. If anyone has any more questions, please continue to ask them. I have a question for Bill. Obviously, we've mentioned, Bill, that there are ongoing discussions about a trade deal within the EU. Does this mean that UK reach is inevitable, or may there be some agreement where UK reach doesn't come into force?
Yeah, in theory, it isn't inevitable, but in reality, it is. And there has been an announcement which to say that the UK will introduce its own system. But until those discussions are finalised, there has been something that's been mentioned in previous discussions, which is until everything is agreed, nothing is agreed, and this remains the case, that there will be further discussions, and until that is allowed, or until that's agreed, we don't know what the outcome will be. What we do know, all of the indications are that we will have a separate system. So we have to plan for that now.
Okay, Bill, we have a question come through from Craig about PIC regulations, yeah, and how they will be applied in UK reach.
Yeah. I think there's still some discussions ongoing about prior informed consent. Again, it hasn't been finalised. So I think we are intending that we'll have probably a follow-up to this within a couple of months. That once we have a bit more detail, certainly around the outcome of the negotiations with the free trade agreements, the outcome of the negotiations around the effection of the Northern Ireland Protocol. PIC has come up in recent discussions as well. There's real concern about the how that will actually impact businesses. It's a real serious issue, but at the moment, there's still some discussions ongoing. So it's one to keep an eye on. Do keep an eye on our social media. Do keep an eye on our website. And as I said, we are looking to follow up as soon as we know more. But yeah, absolutely, Craig, we know that's an issue.
What about authorizations and restrictions? Will they still apply after the end of the transition period? Is there anything we need to do to keep our authorizations active?
Yeah, so strictly speaking, they won't apply after the end. But of course, at the point of departure, then all the existing authorizations and restrictions are mirrored in UK law. But of course, any new ones coming in after that, in theory, are not. Will not go into UK law unless the UK decides also to adopt those restrictions and authorizations. Given the fact that we continue to supply to the EU market, and it is the intention of the government to continue to abide by other aspects of chemical legislations, then it's speculation, and it's kind of taken a slight punt. But I would probably envisage that they will continue to be mirrored. But strictly speaking, they will not apply unless we decide to enact them within UK law.
Okay, we have a question about continuing business continuity and what we should be doing to ensure we have business continuity at the end of the transition period. I think we need to be looking at what actions we should take now, making sure that the existing REACH registrations authorizations that get transferred into UK registrations and UK authorizations under UK REACH. It has been said that if you're a holder of an authorization, it's potentially that you'll need to provide data to the HSE, and that will start in January. If you are a UK business who is now going to be importing chemicals from the EU, then you'll be subject to registration requirement under the UK. Again, transitional provisions here, and but it will require submission of certain data to the HSE. So you need to again see where will you fit on the supply chain. What is your role going to be in the new system? And then, as we've mentioned, at the end of the transition period, EU REACH doesn't apply in the UK, and you can no longer be an EU REACH registrant. So it's important that if you hold a registration, that before the end of the transition period, you look to appoint your OR or to transfer your manufacturing activity to the EU, so that you keep your registration active. Is there anything else, Bill, that you think people should be doing?
Obviously, there's going to be a cost associated with that as well. So that's one of the queries I've come up before, is to say that so absolutely will be. But otherwise, I think you kind of covered the main points there, really. So the other question I had, which was about whether I will need to continue to update my REACH dossier after the UK withdraws. So this is, you hold a registration, continue to hold a registration with an EU-based representative, and strictly speaking, no. But of course, as I said, we will have separate arrangements in the UK. So the answer is no. but the entity within the EU who holds the registration will need to update it.
Yeah, and it should be noted as well that when the registration is transferred, if you transfer to an OR, they will need to update the registration dossier to reflect their change of role, and so that the dossier reflects the new role of the only representative rather than you as the manufacturer or importer under the current rate.
I think we've exhausted the questions for now. Any more questions that will come through? If there aren't any more, then I think we'll leave it there for now. But thank you for everyone for participating. Thank you for the questions that have been raised. I think it's encouraging to see that there's interest, and there's a lot of people are starting to realise the implications for what is going on, and there's a lot of work potentially involved in dealing with the ramifications of this. So, as I say, do keep an eye on our website, on our social media, and look out for further opportunities in the future to participate and find out more about the process. And last but not least, if you're involved in this, and I mean this sincerely, good luck. Thank you.